Morning. Are we on? Should move my mic. That would help. Check test 1, 2. Seems like we got sound. Great. Cool. Good morning, Bob. Thanks for checking in. Thanks for being here. A little bit last minute today, but kick around here for a couple minutes until 10, and then we'll get started right on the dot like always. I think I'm going to talk about transposing and working with keys and finding where you want to be for your voice, because I realize I haven't talked about that. That's like a fundamental skill that everybody needs to know. Good afternoon / good morning, Kelly. It is morning, though I wish I was still in bed. It's been raining for the past number of days, and it's cold. Hope you all had a chance to try out some of the tuning tricks and frustrate yourselves with that, trying to get the tuning dialed in just by ear. It's good fun, good practice. So I was going to talk about transposing, see if we can pick up a few more people on the way. Transposing is basically moving the sound from one key to another key. You're just taking everything and moving it either up or down the same amount. No distances between anything change. Everything, if you have like, I think of like a key is like the family. If you have the daddy note and the mommy note and the children notes and the auntie note, right? Those family relationships aren't going to change from family to family. They're all going to be related the same way, but the family itself might change. And in this case, we're changing the family by moving everything daddy, mommy, children, auntie up or down. This, and everybody moves the same amount. And the reason you do this is because not everybody sings in the same range. Not everybody has, or when you try and arrange things on the ukulele, not everything always fits, and you have to sometimes move things around to get into a key that works better for your voice range or for the ukulele. So for instance, if I was playing a song and I like had the chord sheet, and the chord sheet said key of C, C, F, G7, and I wanted to sing it. If I was to get those main 1, 4, 5 chords in my ear, and then I put the melody on top of that, and I find where I want to be singing. If I was to do, this is a Hawaiian song called Hilo One. Ai, ai, hilo one. It's kind of low, right? Ka e ha kamana o sweet Emalia o ko aloha ia. That kind of a thing. It's fine, and actually that sounds a lot better than I was expecting it to. Usually when I sing lower, I have a harder time hitting my pitches. But if that was too low, I don't just have to live with that. I don't just have to let that be the way it is. I can change the song, change the key of the song so that it fits my voice better. Because if I'm singing that same exact thing in a higher place, the range that it's in my voice is going to kind of change. So if I was to move it up, let's say I was to go to F, that's, I think, just from what I know of singing and playing, that I can probably just sing it in F, and you'll hear that when I pitch my voice up to that new key, I'm going to be able to project a little bit more. It's going to be a little bit more like focused. Ai ai hilo one ka e ha kamana o sweet Maria o ko aloha ia. And if I was to go back to C, ai ai hilo one, big difference, right? So one is pitched up a little bit higher, one is lower, and depending on the time of day or if you're sick or just how your voice is, you're going to want to be singing in a different key. So you would want to know how to be able to make that change from C, which is not super ideal for my voice unless I'm going for that low effect. I want to be able to change it to the key of F. So that's what I want to show you folks today, is how to move keys and maybe some practical applications of moving things around and some considerations to make for the instrument itself. So I'm going to start, I think, with this little doodad. Of course, I'm wearing a black sweater and trying to show you. It's a capo. All right. And all it does is it goes across your strings and it holds all the strings down on the same fret. So if I tighten it up, all the strings are going to be pressed on the 3rd fret as opposed to. And what this allows me to do is, if I'm just choosing the 3rd fret because I feel like it, I've moved the tuning up. So basically now you can imagine that I'm barring with my index finger. But what that's done is it's basically transposed the tuning of the ukulele up higher on the instrument. And now, if I was to play the same exact chords that I was playing, say the C, F, and G7, as you'll see, I can use the same fingers and the same shapes. Here's your G7, here's your F, here's your C. And sometimes capos goof with your tuning, so it might not be perfectly in tune. But the idea is that I could play the same exact thing, right? Same mommy, daddy, children notes, and everything's moving the same amount. It's just higher because all of a sudden this capo is acting as the nut of the ukulele, and now my tuning is up. It'd be like an E flat 6 tuning instead of our normal C6. So if I was to play the same thing, I could play the same exact chord shapes and it would be transposed for me, right? Ai ai hilo one ka e ha kamana o sweet Maria, that kind of a thing. And so for this reason, capos are a good illustration tool. I don't feel that capos are super necessary on ukulele unless you're doing like weird stuff that kind of requires them to be in a certain place. But just as like a band-aid fix, I don't think the cape, like on a guitar, you have way more strings to press down. It can get really old to like hold an F bar chord all day if you're playing an F a lot. I get why you would use a capo then, but ukulele, for the most part, if you can get kind of comfortable with your bar chords, you probably don't need it 99% of the time. But for illustration purposes, it's super great, which is why I pulled this out of my case to kind of demonstrate. All right, so capo is basically what is happening when we're transposing. Is everything's moving the same amount, it's just going to a new spot on the neck. So I'm going to show you. I'm not very prepared. I probably need a piece of paper to make this work as best as possible. Do I have any printer paper anywhere? I don't think I do, but this will do the trick. My big giant clipboard. Okay, so when you start with transposing, you need to know two things to do it the way that, well, let me back up. There is the easiest, most straightforward way is just to take everything and shift it up a number of frets, everything the same amount until it matches your voice. So if I was playing, right, and that was too low, I could say, okay, well, C is too low, so I'm just going to change everything to a closed chord so I can move it, right? And to do that, all you do is you just minus one finger number. So now instead of my ring finger, I would play with my pinky on C, and then you can bar behind the nut. And if you move everything up the same amount, it becomes a closed chord and you can shift it and everything stays the same relationship to each other. So I could say, okay, well, C is too low. What if I go up a little bit and play all this stuff in C again, but now with a bar, which is basically like my capo. So you could do that and not know where you're going to. Just like, I need to go a little bit higher. I don't know, like maybe this much higher. Oh, maybe that's not high enough. You could continue going up with this closed chord shape. What if I wanted to go higher? Right? I can do that, no problem. And even if I don't know what chords I'm at on any of these frets with these higher chord shapes, I'm playing the same exact shapes as I was down here in the key of C, just barred up higher, and I'm getting the higher sound. My voice can go to that higher place. You don't really need to know much more than that. But the problem with that is you get to a certain point, say like the fifth fret or whatever, and it starts sounding like it's really high on the ukulele itself. The keys don't really have like high or lownesses to them. I've never really experienced, because everything kind of just cycles around in a circle. But what does happen is if you're playing chord voicings that end up way up the neck, all your notes are going to be higher in the range of the instrument, and it's going to start sounding just kind of like, yeah, chipmunky a little bit. And so that's where you're going to want to know what this chord is. And if you just know what it is off the top of your head, that's great. You can figure out what this, and this equal. That's fine. That's one way to do it. But what I want to show you is how to figure it out on paper so you can know where to go and then know how to play these same chords in a different place on the fretboard, what they would be lower. Because if you go lower again, a lot of times you're going to get back to that full sound, and instead of it being like really tinny, kind of chipmunky sounding, you can get a more full sound, which is often what you want when you're singing, right? I'm just talking kind of about singing now. Even if you don't sing, you can appreciate what this means, because it's the same exact concept as if you were going to move to just solo arranging on the instrument itself. Okay, so what you need to know is what key you're starting in, the scale of the key you're starting in, right? This is super street theory that I'm going to show you, but it's straightforward. Anybody should be able to follow along. So key of C is C, D, E, F, G, A, B, and then back to C. Right? Make sure that's visible on my webcam. Cool. All on the same page. So what you need to know after that is where you're going to. And where you're going to can be a little bit of a trick, because you need to decide how far to move. If I was to go from C, if C was too low, but I went to like all the way up to A or something, A might be too high. So you got to find the happy medium and go there. But once you decide what key, and you can repeat this process as many times as you need to find the key that you want to be in or what fits your voice or whatever. In this case, I'm going to try going to the key of F because that felt nice to sing. I'm going to go there. So what I need to know now is what the scale is for the key of F. And in this case, it's going to be the same as C, except you're going to have a B flat instead of a B. So you'd have F, G, A, B flat. I'm not giving myself enough room. C, D, E, and back to F. Okay, so this is kind of a shabby illustration, but you're trying to keep everything in columns as much as possible. Because what you're going to use is this is going to be kind of like your key, like your map key, not like song key, but a map key, a legend to match up the chords that you're playing in one key and get them to move to another, right? So we're keeping it in columns. Everything vertically is matched. Those vertically are the family members, right? There are going to, if I go from here to here, the family members are going to be the same, whether I'm in the key of F or in the key of C. That's what we're trying to do. So all you're gonna do is in the key of C. If I'm going to the key of F, every C that I play is going to become an F. And if I'm in the key of C, every F that I play is going to become a B flat. And every G or G7 I play, you can add whatever chord type you'd like to these. Is this backwards? I don't know if YouTube broadcasts backwards or not. I hope not. I hope you can get the idea, even if it is. Um, G7 would become C7. You're just working vertically up and down in the columns. And if this is backwards, you might want to write it out at home so you can see it in the correct order and not feel all dyslexic and weird about it. All right. So if I'm looking at my chart and referring to my chart, I can, if you want, you could circle whatever main chords you're using so you don't have to be confused by looking at everything else. But in the key of C, I'm playing my 1-4-5 R, C. And that's another thing that this can show is you can just assign numbers to each of the columns. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and then you go back to 1. Those numbers in that column are going to be the Roman numerals or the Nashville number system you would apply to each of these family members in its certain place in the key. So C and F are the 1, and then if I was playing 4 and 5, the 4 and 5 would be F and G, or in the key of F, it would be B flat and C. That's really all there is to it, is you just need to know what key you're coming from and what key you're going to, right? So before it was just C. Ai, ai, hi, lo, ne. Ka, e, ha, ka, mana, o. Oh, sweet Emalia. Oh, ko, u, aloha, ia. We could do that same thing by doing the capo move up trick. We could go to the key of F and we could play those same things up higher. And we've done that. But what this chart and this legend allows us to do is we can find the chords in a lower place. So now I know that F, B flat, and C7 are my equivalents to what I was just playing in the key of C. So if I was to do it again in F, ai, ai, hi, lo, ne. Ka, e, ha, ka, mana, o. Oh, sweet Emalia. Oh, ko, u, aloha, ia. And if I wanted to go to a different key, if F wasn't doing it for me, I could add as many keys in a vertical line as I would like. And you can find scale charts that just show the scales. You could print out all 12 scales, all 12 keys in Western music if you wanted. It's kind of busy, and I like just writing it out myself and for people to write it out themselves so you get used to what notes are in what key, and you kind of start to see it just kind of as your own work. So if I could write it out a little bit better. Now I have more room. You could either write out the new scale, the starting scale, and which in our case would be C. You could write that down again and then add the new scale. In this case, I'm going to do G. Or you could just add the new scale below and just end up with multiple scales on top of each other. So in this case, I've got the C scale on top and the G scale on the bottom. But if you wanted to like go to the key of A next, you could write out the A scale below and the D scale and the E scale, whatever you wanted to figure out. So same idea. If I was going to the key of G, our 1 would be G and C together, right? It converts in a column. And then the 4, 1, 2, 3, 4 is F in the key of C, but it would be C in the key of G. And then G7 in the key of C becomes D7 in the key of G. Hope I got my letters all right there. Okay, so one more time, going from C to G. Now we could play the song that we basically continued shifting up with our capo, right? But now instead of playing the G up here, we know that this is a G. We're moving to a G chord. So I would want to play. Ai ai hilone ka eha kamana o sweet Maria o ko aloha ia. Right? And I'm going to take a sidetrack here because this is an important thing too. 2020. People ask about this all the time, and no one seems to know the actual answer. I don't know if I do. I'm not going to tell you that I actually know the answer, but I feel like I have a good place to speak from because I grew up with people who only never played this chord, right? This is the Hawaiian D7. Okay? In the key of G, you don't play this D7 when you're playing Hawaiian music. That's just silly. Listen to it. That doesn't sound very Hawaiian. But this, that sounds Hawaiian. Why does it sound Hawaiian? Why do we care? What's the difference? Because when you play this bar D7, and this is not to say that you can't ever play this bar D7. It works in a lot of styles. But in Hawaiian music, you have a flat 7 blues note at the very top of the chord. So that's what you hear. That's the note that your ear hears most. And it's really twangy and really bluesy. It just doesn't sit well with other instruments. All you hear, if you have a group of ukuleles playing, all you hear is that note over D, and it becomes very kind of clunky. And so what the Hawaiians have ended up doing over the years is they just play this kind of this life hack chord 2020, and this removes the C from the top of the note and puts it down on the open C string. So now instead of the C, you have an A on the bottom, and it becomes a lot more mellow. It sits a lot nicer in a group, like if you're playing with slack key guitars or multiple ukulele players. This is just like way too much for the place that it's supposed to cover in the music. I find that it's just overbearing, and you don't see a whole lot of people like in a legit Hawaiian kani kapila who are playing this D7, just because that kind of, that sits a little lower. It sits in the back. It's an accompaniment chord, whereas this is like begging for attention the whole entire time. The thing with this though is it's not actually a D7 chord. This is, I believe it's in like an F sharp diminished, because if you examine it, the notes are from the top string to the bottom string: A, C, F sharp, and another A. There's not even a D in there. So we're using, and the reason it still fits and the reason it works is because inside of a D chord, you have A, D, F sharp, C. So if you get rid of the D, you're left with that F diminished, and that's all this is. So this is using 3 notes out of the normal 4 in a D7 chord, and basically your ear is filling in the gap. Anyways, that's a important side note that doesn't ever get discussed. Um, or if it does, people are just like, I don't know. I heard about the Hawaiian D7 too. I don't know what it is. It's like this random thing that no one quite understands. But that's all it is. Is it just a different chord voicing that takes the blues sound from being really super twangy and upfront to being a lot more mellow and kind of relaxed and can sit in the background. But it's not really a D7. It's which is why it's the Hawaiian D7. Okay. Any questions about any of that? I'm just kind of rambling here today, just working on this key stuff. I don't even know if you can see that with the contrast glare. Um, so when you're singing, I think what you want to try and do is aim for a happy place in the middle of your range. If I'm ai ai hilo one I can hit that. But if I was to keep going up, say I was to go like up the octave to C, I could probably make that work too. But it's not super, I don't know, it doesn't sit very well. It's not super graceful. And if I was going to play like in a song circle for 3 hours, I wouldn't be singing that high the whole time. There's just no way I could sustain that. My voice would wear out and I couldn't do it. I'm not that good of a singer. I don't have that much singing stamina to just belt it that high all day long. So what you want to do is you find kind of a happy medium, because there's a certain amount of like excitement that singing high brings. Like if you're just belting and singing high, it's very very alive and very vibrant. Whereas if you're singing lower, it can be a little bit more boring sounding. So you want to try and strike a balance, because singing lower, you can sustain that for longer usually. And if you're singing super high, it's exciting. So if you strike a balance, that's what you're probably going to do for, your 2-hour gig. As opposed to if you're playing like a 15-minute festival set, you could go in and like belt the whole thing and just like be, it's so exciting. He sounds so good because he's singing high, and you can do that for 15 minutes. Whereas not so much for the 2-hour gig. So if you're in it for the long haul, you want to find kind of the middle. And the way you find the middle is sing the whole song. If there are any notes that you're stretching to reach or feel like they're going to wear you out if you had to do it over and over and over for a while, bring the key down. Again, if there's any notes that are so low that you're like really bogging your voice, or you feel like you're singing out of tune because you're reaching for the super low notes, you probably want to bring it up. And if it's just a song that has too wide a range, be humble enough to just admit that. There are lots of songs that I just don't even try doing because they're crazy crazy ranges, and I know that I'm not going to be able to place that in my voice in a way that's going to be super useful, because either it's going to sound too low or it's going to be too high and I'm worn out just to fit all the notes into my voice. So keep that in mind. And yeah, try and move some things around. Take some songs that you already play and you know sing them, assess them, see if you think that they could be pitched up or pitched down to fit your voice a little bit better. Because a lot of times you make a song sheet, or I teach a song and it's like, okay, let's learn to play this song in the key of C. It's really easy. I can kind of sing it because I'm the teacher. But when you go home, it's like completely out of your range. It's not realistic to expect that everybody's going to sing in the same place, which is why we need multiple keys to accommodate the different songs. And so don't just because you're given a song sheet in a certain key, or you're taught a song in a certain key, that's because that's what the teacher's teaching. That's what the song sheet is showing you. But it doesn't necessarily mean that it's going to be a great fit. So you might have to move things, change things, adjust to make it work for you. Um, the other thing that we could talk about is kind of how arranging works on the ukulele, and how you find an ideal key for arranging a song. Um, it's sort of the same principle. You don't want to be too low, you don't want to be too high. What I go for is, at least on low G, I can't speak to high G. Maybe the high G guys out there arrange differently than this. I'm not sure. But for me, I try and keep the melodies, for the most part. There can be a couple notes below this, but I try and keep the melody on the two top strings, the two bottom strings closest to the floor, highest sounding. Because if the melody's here, I have two harmony notes that I can always add below. And you can go back and look. I did a video on solo arranging that would talk a lot more about that. But as far as transposing, we didn't really talk about that so much. And when you're transposing for solo arranging, if I have those two harmony notes at all times, because I'm going with a melody note on top and harmony notes below it, I'm going to always have a little bit of chord structure that I can put around any harmony note. Whereas if I'm playing my melody and I go down onto the G string, there's no lower notes that I can play to accompany that note. So that melody note's going to be all by itself when I play it, unless I'm going to do like ghost playing on higher strings, because I don't want to cover up that melody. But yeah, that's a big consideration is how low you let the melody go. And like I said, there can be exceptions, because some songs do have a larger range than the ukulele can typically cover, but that's the general idea. But you also don't want to be playing, up here the whole time, because that becomes kind of thin and hard to if you're playing in really, I mean, if you're playing in any key, if you're playing up high, except for certain chords and certain keys, you're not going to be able to utilize the open strings, and you're going to end up it's going to sound very closed and high, and you won't be able to fill it out a whole lot. So you're going to try and strike that medium. Ideally, you would be like within the first 5 frets on the two bottom strings, because then you can still reach things. You can still play open chords to get that bigger sound. That would be the ideal place to get a song transposed to. But let's try Hilo One, just because. So that's key of C, like we started. That's basically my melody. It's actually turning out to be really great. So that would actually be a really good place to play that melody. But just for instance, let's say I was learning it in the key of G, okay? I'm gonna have two options. It's kind of a lot of notes on the C string. So that's a little bit low, but if I was to go up the octave and try and find the same melody an octave higher on the G, if I was to harmonize that, everything I'm going to play is going to be really high and closed. Right? It's a very tight sound, not necessarily the kind of thing that you want to do. So you want to find that happy medium key that's going to put everything in a nice place. And so if I was to play it in the key of C, I can keep a lot of open strings going the whole time. that kind of idea. Any questions about any of that? There's lots to practice here, but it's not necessarily like the straightforward kind of thing where it's like, oh yeah, I can practice that. It's more of like it's just something that you need to know, you need to work through and try out. So yeah, try a couple of your songs. If you've got any melodies that you're learning or solo arrangements that you're playing that seem high or seem kind of low, try and move them. It's the same thing with solo arranging melodies. If you're transposing a melody, it works exactly the same. You just go note to note. So if your melody is like C, E, G, F, you would just change it G, B, D, C. You just, note for note along your legend line. And try a number of keys, see if there's one that works a lot better. Keep in mind that as you're transposing, you don't want to always, at least for like solo picking transposing, you don't want to necessarily move everything just straight up from where you have it. Don't just like +5 frets or whatever you end up doing, because you're going to end up with the same sound and the same kind of problem. Like if I'm playing and that's too low, I don't want to move up and play with that same shape, because I still have the same problem. I'm still stuck on lower strings than I'd like. So you need to shift the notes from wherever you're at to the next place that they can occur on the next set of strings. That would be the ideal situation. Is don't just add numbers to what you're doing or add fret numbers to where you're at, which it does work. That's a quick and easy way to transpose, but it's best if you can shift the notes so you can gain access to those additional harmony notes lower towards the ceiling. Oh wow, it doesn't want to stay in tune today. Time for some new strings, I think, finally. So yeah, if you have any questions, throw them up in the chat. Let me know. I think that's all I kind of have bouncing around in my brain today. But I think it's very, very useful, very important for any ukulele player, even if you're just starting out, knowing how to at least understanding what's happening when somebody says they transpose, or let's play it in the key of D, and you know how to play it in the key of G, then at least you'll know what's happening. And if you can't, even if you can't keep up, or you can't do it in your head fast enough to keep up with the song, at least you could like spend that time writing it out and figuring out exactly what's going on. Just like, oh, I know it in the key of G. Here's the G scale. They're playing in the key of D. Here's the D scale. Write it out, get your columns going, and then follow along and see if what you know matches up with the people you're playing with or whatever it may be. So that's that. Maybe one of these days I'll try and figure out how to do like a broadcast of how to use any tune. That's sort of a it's a killer app and program, but it would be like how to use software to help transpose and learn songs. That would be really interesting. But I think I need to figure out how to do the screen thing, and that might be more than I'm up for. We'll see. Thanks everybody for tuning in. I will see you next week, same time, same place. The pre-posted scheduled video should be up on the channel. You can go find that and click the little set reminder thing to get an email ping when it finally goes live next week, Tuesday. Otherwise, yeah, practice, try out your transposing, and feel free to hit me up, email or Discord or whatever means you can get in touch with me if you have any questions. I'll see you next week. Take care of one another and be safe out there. Aloha.